You know, at MRC TV, we often employ levity to impart information, but levity is really not justified for this story. The place is Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, and the town, city, and state have made big plans for the 18 parcels of property owned by innocent townspeople. Through the force of government, Governor Scott Walker is subsidizing a Taiwanese corporation called Foxconn to the tune of over $4 billion to locate a plant on land currently owned by peace-loving individuals.
But still, some homeowners are holding out on selling their property for the project.
Where am I going to live now that you want to take away my home of 28 years?
The state and town of Mount Pleasant are clearly very hungry for this land, and they're clearly very thirsty for what they think they're going to get once they give this land to the corporation. What do they expect? Big tax money. So this is a lesson not just in crony capitalism, better understood in economic circles as mercantilism, as Adam Smith told us in 1776 in his great book called The Wealth of Nations. This is a study in how eminent domain is seen now after a pernicious 2005 Supreme Court ruling, and it tells us even more about the very rationale that we are offered for the justification of government. You see, in 2005, the Supreme Court heard a case called Kelo v. City of New London, in which a woman named Suzette Kelo and a number of individuals who lived in the city of New London were seeing a tax by the city government to take their land through eminent domain. And the city argued in front of the Supreme Court a very interesting and new concept of eminent domain, where previously eminent domain was seen as the government taking property for things that people think the government is supposed to do, like building roads or something like that. This was the idea that the government was going to take the land in order to give it to the corporation Pfizer, and then Pfizer would be able to pay them more tax money than the residential taxes could bring in, and then that would be used for the public good. And guess what? The Supreme Court majority, thanks to the swing vote of George H.W. Bush appointee David Souter, found in favor of the City of New London and this new spin on eminent domain.
The Supreme Court has agreed to decide if governments can seize people's homes and businesses for economic development projects.
This resulted in the passage of a law in Wisconsin after Kelo to prevent this sort of thing from being done, and yet the town of Mount Pleasant is trying to do precisely this, even as Scott Walker, Paul Ryan, and Donald Trump are applauding it, applauding what they see as bringing in a big corporation to start new jobs. The consequentialist philosophy undergirding this, where the individual is meaningless and the ends justify the means, is extremely dangerous and has brought incredible tragedy throughout history, and yet they're doing this. In fact, they're not just trying to skirt the Wisconsin law, they're coming up with all sorts of creative ways to try to get around the law itself.
Even though they're telling the media and everybody that every homeowner has sold their home willingly, they're doing so under the threat of eminent domain.
The redevelopment plan recommended by the Village of Mount Pleasant's Community Development Authority tonight now calls the area where Kim's home is a blighted area.
They're claiming in some cases that the land is blighted, so it can be taken that way. Look, private property is private property. And this actually exposes something which is much bigger, much greater, and much more philosophical. It tells us that the very rationale that we are offered about government is bogus. The idea that you don't own your land is inherent in the concept of government. And yet, we are told that government is there to supposedly protect our property and protect us from encroachments by others. But what is the entity which always claims it can take your property? The government. So in order to protect your property, they can take your property. In order to function, they can take your property. In order to protect you, they can threaten you. It seems like circular logic to me. And this is at the heart of eminent domain. The idea that the entity that is supposedly there to protect your property can at any time take your property through eminent domain. It doesn't matter whether they've got new rationales and new spins on eminent domain. That's just more poison in the poisonous pot. The idea itself is pernicious.
I don't know of any homeowners who wanted to leave this area, and who wants to be threatened that if you don't sell, then we're going to take it anyways.
And it's something that we can remember even as many of these property owners try to bring suit to defend their own land. That suit will be upcoming, and we will be watching it closely. Thank you for watching MRC TV, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you like what we're saying, if you disagree, feel free to comment. We always love to hear people's opinions. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.